Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. I should we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where we will talk about, I don't really know because it is the weekend, everybody looking forward to their weekend, and we're chilling, we're relaxing. Still feel kind of like tired for some reason. I don't really know. I did sleep quite late last night, which is, almost certainly the reason, but I also woke up quite late today, so it's like you give and you take, you live and you learn, and you dance and you sing. Well, it's not even an expression, I don't know. What should we talk about today? I don't know. Good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 9:24 p.m. on Saturday, May 27th, 2023. What we could talk about, there's that new Lord of Rings Gollum game, which, is getting a lot of bad press, I suppose. I think I brought it up yesterday, but I didn't really know what was going on with it, and now I sort of do. At least I've seen some videos of it. It's just sort of like a situation where I'm just like, I don't know. It is what it is. Very strange. I forgot KK Side is going to be here. We should figure out which song we need from him. I guess I'll bring it up at the moo. Have a move it, and that's not a thing. KK Slider Songs Wiki. What can we talk about today? I'm not really sure. So I think it's time to pluck a random anecdote or story out of nowhere and see. Wait, did we not use the Nukmal terminal yesterday? Day one? What happened? Time to pluck a story out of somewhere. I'm reaching back in my head, just thinking what we could possibly talk about. I don't know, I already got nothing at the moment. I mean, the only thing that came to mind was like, I read a Wikipedia article about something called learned helplessness today, which, I guess we can talk about that. You might as well, and that sort of thing. Because it's interesting, like these science experiments which get done, not always very fascinating, but a lot of them are genuinely quite fascinating, and you perhaps won't be so surprised to learn about the ones I find most fascinating are ones which reflect on like human psychology or sociology or things like that, human behaviours, or not even human behaviours, animal behaviours as well. Sorry, let me move my microphone slightly. And that's kind of one which learned helplessness is about, because basically as a concept it is that if you find yourself being in a situation where you cannot influence the outcome, a bad outcome for yourself, it means that in the future you are less likely to try and attempt to try to stop or prevent a bad outcome happening to you again, is basically how to summarize it. AKA, if you fail once, you're less likely to try again to stop the failure again. AKA, if your confidence gets shot, it gets destroyed. I had to. I guess I'll forewarn you that in the science experiment, dogs are given small shocks, from what I understand it. I don't know how big shocks necessarily, but I assume it's the same as a shock collar. And well, whether you stand for that or not is, fair enough, and it's not really my place to argue. It does again seem like questionable, but I can't deny, I suppose, interesting results from a scientific experiment. But basically what they did is they got like a group of dogs or whatever, and they had like I can't remember exactly the details, but they split them into 3 groups, and the first group was a control group where they basically like put them like in a harness or like locked them up or something, and then for like a length of time, and then release them. Their control group, is just because to simulate the effects without the actual test themselves. Then the second group, it was like they trapped they like restricted the movement of dogs in the same sort of way, but then gave them like small like shocks, I suppose. But the thing is, the dogs could stop the shocks at any time by like I think it was like flipping a lever or like pressing a button. So once that happened, the shocks just stopped. That was it. And the third group was one where it's basically the same setup as the second group. It was a load of dogs again, but they were getting like small shocks. But this time they had a lever or they had a button which didn't do anything. So it doesn't matter what they did, basically, they would still get shocked. Which is, it's certainly when it's like, hey, that sounds kind of cruel, but I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert in animals. I'm not an expert in science, maybe the small shocks are, very, very harmless sort of things, just sort of, the same way as you getting like pinched, I suppose. You wouldn't be like, oh, it's, particularly that mean to, or maybe not pinch, like poke someone or something. I don't know, but again, it's not really my place to say, I suppose. I'd let the people who are much more educated on that matter talk about it instead. But yeah, that was basically like phase 1 of the experiment. And then phase 2 is when we're actually doing the testing thing, is they put the dogs in like this box, in this room, I suppose, a small room separated by a low wall. And on one side, if a dog was sat on or stayed on that side, they would get small electric shocks again. The only way they could stop it would be by hopping the lower wall, which they could all do very easily, and going to the other side of the room where there weren't any shocks. And the thing they found is that dogs in that third group were significantly more likely to not even attempt to escape, not even attempt to stop the shocks. Like the ones from the first and second group, immediately as soon as they started getting shocked, hopped over the wall and was like, I'm out of here and I don't want to deal with this. Or the third group, a lot of them just sat there and was like, they basically accepted their fate, which is very sad to think about, I suppose. I suppose it is, empathy, I suppose, playing into human emotions kind of makes you go, oh, that's sad, isn't it? It's very sad. It basically sounds like some you can liken it to like trauma or abuse or something like that. I don't know necessarily, of course, if that's the case, but I guess that's kind of like what learned helplessness kind of is, because that is then something, they took that experiment and then they did it on humans. I can't remember exactly how they tested on humans, but they did a similar sort of way where they issued some sort of punishment for groups. There was one group who had no punishment, no reward or whatever, and another group who got punishment but could stop it, and then a third group who could not stop the punishment. And then they did a test of that sort of thing, and the third group were much more likely to just accept their fate, I suppose, when the bad thing happens. And, it's a fascinating sort of thing, because it's not really something I don't know if you necessarily, but it's not something that you consciously think about too much. It's a thing which inherently makes sense, I think. Once your confidence is shattered somehow, you can intuitively guess that people will be less likely to put themselves out there again. It's just, everyone's probably felt that sort of emotion in some way or another, right? It's, quite a common, there was a commonality, I suppose, to that emotion, or that feeling, or that experience. But I find it truly quite a fascinating one, because it's like, that's particularly strange. And apparently, just to lean into the more social aspect of it once again, is that despite this behaviour being ingrained in them, these dogs were by themselves, it turns out the behaviour can also be uningrained from them, by, either like it was a scientist like showing them how to like step over the wall by either like placing their paws down and then letting them do it a couple of times until they got comfortable with it, or from the dogs replicating other dogs. I think it was like we put the ones from different groups together, and the dogs from the third group saw the first and second jump over the wall, so they eventually followed suit. It's like, it's both like a very depressing thing to think about, like learned helplessness is a thing. There's just like it's built into, not in just human nature, dog nature, I suppose, as well, that once you have been betrayed, or once something has failed for you, in one aspect, you are less likely to try and prevent or fight against that failure again in the future. It's sort of like, sort of being beaten down, I guess, is why it sounds kind of depressing, but it's also quite motivating, I suppose, at the same time, where it's like, but you can undo it by either seeing someone else go through, seeing someone else do the same things you need to do to get out of the same situation, or by having someone help you through it at the same time. That's just like, it's almost like too good to be true, I suppose. It's like almost just like a story arc, but it's like a real life effect. But yeah, science has a lot of these very fascinating experiments. Like there's one which I don't know necessarily like how these even come to be, how you even pitch them, because it sounds very strange in the first place. There's a lot of things about like lab rats testing, these sort of things, like animal testing in general, which, I think at its core is something which, would be preferable if you didn't have to do. But the thing is, animal testing, I suppose, in a sense, can be quite useful, for things like testing pharmaceutical drugs and things like that. People often, leap to a conclusion that's like, oh, all animal testing must be bad because you're like harming the animals. But a lot of the times it's like the same way, with like human testing all of these drugs and that sort of thing, is like we're literally saving lives by allowing scientists to, refine their research, right? It's crazy. But then there's like this weird spot, you know, with these psychology ones where it's like, you know, the results are fascinating, but I still don't really know how I feel about it. You know, with medical ones, I'm sort of like, okay, that's like I get it. Like, what else are you going to do? it's if you're testing something which is meant to work on living creatures, that how could you can't really not do that, I suppose, to a certain degree. You know, trial runs. Obviously, there's a lot of steps. Like, the scientific experiment, I suppose, the scientific method, I suppose, and is grossly simplified, I think, in a lot of people's minds. You know, there's a lot of steps I'd imagine you had to, I say imagine, again, I haven't worked in scientific research, you had to go through before you even can conceive of getting to the stage, I'd imagine, of testing on creatures or people or whatever whose livelihood might be affected. Because, you know, when we as human creatures are, you know, sociable, I guess. We're empathetic, you know, give most people a reason to be like, hey, do you want to hurt this animal or not hurt this animal? Most people are going to be like, why would I hurt this animal? That's pointless. Excuse me. Most people are going to choose the choice which prevents suffering, which is, you know, good. It's very good in a society, well, I mean, yes, in a society, but a social-based species like we are. I completely forgot to look up Nigma missions, because we're going to slowly run out if we keep doing these, Tortimer Island visits. Wood, coffee, hit rocks. Okay, all three of these are very doable. Yeah, but and then you get to like these psychology ones, which are like, it's very fascinating. And it's sort of like, I'm a very two minds about it, where, you know, I'm fascinated by the scientific result of it, being like, but also like, is that the best way to do it? Like, at least if human test subjects, you know, they know what they're signing up for. Although some of them still are quite messed up. Like, you know about one of I can't remember what it's called, but basically the general idea is a test subject comes in, two test subjects come in, and one of them is basically the quiz master, and the other one is the of a tester, and one is a testee. And basically the tester needs to ask a load of questions to the testee, and then the idea is pitched to them about seeing like how much like negative punishment affects someone's ability to correctly answer questions, not answer questions, but be coherent, I don't know. And it's basically the testee keeps getting things wrong, and the tester needs to administer higher and higher and stronger shocks, up to the point where the testee starts, you know, complaining about it, being like, hey, I want out, or it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, please let me go. Ow, this really hurts, or stuff like that. Just like begging, like, please let me go. So much so that the tester will be like, to the science people, like, do I really need to continue doing this? It sounds like they're in like a lot of pain. And then the science experiment people just, you know, scientists just go, please just continue with the science experiment. This is all like for the name of the experiment. And they just continue. And what it actually is, it's not like an experiment based on tester and testee and like reception to negative reinforcement, but it's actually an experiment to do with how people, I guess, respond to people in positions of power, I suppose, or how like, I don't really know exactly how to express it, but how people are resistant to going against, like, you know, direct orders. I suppose it's, you know, not necessarily like obedience, because that seems like a weird way to put it, but, you know, just like being told what to do and like breaking against that, I suppose. It feels uncomfortable to a certain degree, even if you are hurting someone to an extraordinary degree, so much over they stop responding. Some people just continue onwards. And I don't mean to, you know, look at that and be disparaging to the people who are part of that experiment, being like, wow, you were just heartless, soulless monsters. You know, how dare you do something like that? Because the truth is, which, you know, is perhaps an ugly truth which people don't want to face, most of us, if we were in that experiment, we would do exactly the same thing, you know. I'd love to think that as soon as the person on the other side being like, hey, I want to get out, I don't want to do this anymore, I would be like, hey, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And the scientists will be like, continue, and I'd be like, no, I'm putting my foot down, I don't want to be part of this experiment. If I, you know, they can't stop or whatever like that when they ask to. I'd love to think that's what I would do, but the genuine answer is I don't know if that's what I would do. Of course, now I know the experiment, I would do that, you know, because now I know, you know, things can be outside of experiment. You know, if anything is going to happen to me, that's going to be like a real life scenario, and that's something you need to stand up for. Well, I should say, I would love to think I would do that. At the end of the day, we are all human. We are all fallible. We are all subject to the same sort of peer pressure and influence that, you know, that that occur, right? So, you know, no one's immune to it in the first place, but it's at least the first step, I think, is being able to understand it and overcome it to a certain degree, and being able to at least challenge these assumptions at the same time. So yeah, anyway, there was a lot of messed up experiments, because that one's pretty messed up. There was also like the Stanford prison experiment, which is like insanely messed up, which basically concluded, wow, people get extremely corrupt when they get any like ounce of power. There was that other one with the children. I can't remember what it was. Where it's basically like blue eyes are superior or something. If you have blue eyes, you're the best. And then there's basically like treating the blue eyes as if they were better people than the kids with brown eyes. And then it was just basically looking into, I think, like kids and human conditions, and like how easily, I suppose, a hierarchy can be reinforced, and, you know, how much of an effect, I suppose, it has sociologically on people. It's weird to think about, because it's so easy, I think, to look at these experiments and be like, wow, I would never be like that, you know, those are horrible, why would you do that? But it's a thing, you know. I haven't signed up to be part of any experiments, but I can't guarantee to myself that if I did that experiment, I would do anything different. I mean, statistically, the numbers are against me, you know. That's literally what the scientists were proving. They statistically shown that, yeah, most people in this experiment did do the thing which is conceivably seen as bad, you know. That's crazy. It's genuinely insane, I think. But the plus side, I like the fact that scientists are doing this in the first place, so we can actually learn from these things in the first place, you know, to bring it all back to learned helplessness. Now, learning from that situation, learning how the other dogs who got this learned helplessness in the situation learn to overcome it, it's something that you can now apply to your own real life, right? You might find yourself in the situation, you know, where it's just like, I'm trying to think, where you've faced, you know, a harsh stinging rejection before, which felt like something out of your control. You know, maybe someone, you know, completely betrayed you or something, or maybe, you know, just something just didn't go your way, which you had no influence over. It's very easy, I suppose, to fall into trap being like, yeah, that's just going to be how it happens every single time, and then you're not gonna, I suppose, fight for yourself when it happens in the future. You know, maybe I can't remember, like one of the examples they used was like, hey, you know, the fear of rejection, or like you go out to ask someone like on a date or something, and then they reject you by saying like, hey, I'm like completely not interested in you. It's something which is rather out of your control. Okay, KK lovers is the next one we need, but it's like, it still stings, it still hurts, and then that maybe permanently, but it for the rest of your every single other time you're like, hey, maybe I want to try and, you know, ask someone out again, you remember that and you say, because that already happened, because I've been rejected before, then of course that's what's going to happen again, you know. But there's no point in even trying, you know. You give up before you even started, which is, you know, obviously, you know, me saying it like that, I hope you're sitting there thinking like, hey, that's not how it should go, you know. You still got to try these sort of things. A little bit of, you know, you can't give up your laughter because you're scared of a little pain, in the infamous words of a My Little Pony song, which is honestly a very hard line, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so KK lovers, just make sure we type it in correctly. No one out here watching a KK Slider concert in the rain. You're not true stans. But yeah, it's just, I guess it's both like sad but then inspiring is what I mean to say. It's sort of like this is a really sad story. I'm sad that this is not even just like a theory. This is literally just like scientifically a scientific behavior, which is learned and difficult to unlearn. But I guess the bright side is it can be unlearned, you know. It's motivating in its own sense, I suppose. So yeah, learned helplessness. Maybe you can reflect on your own life and you can see yourself in that same situation for, you know, whatever, you know. I'm not going to be here to judge or cast any aspersions on your life. You will have to unfortunately do that self-reflection yourself, because I'm not a psychologist. It's the sort of thing where, like, yeah, maybe now you realize you can break out of it. You know, it's quite difficult to do by yourself, but, you know, it's not as difficult to do with someone assisting you, or by like observing others who've broken out of the same cycle. That's cool, you know. I guess it's reassuring in a certain sense. Sad that a bad thing can happen, but reassuring that it's scientifically proven, I suppose, that you can break out of that in the first place, right? And let's see. Anyway, in humans, learned helplessness is related to a concept of self-efficacy. Self-effacing is belief in the capacity to act in ways necessary to reach specific goals. Okay. The individual believes in the innate ability to achieve goals. Okay. The Wikipedia article literally explained it in the next sentence. Is if that clinical depression and related mental illnesses may result from a real or perceived absence of control over the outcome of a situation. You know, I think lack of control, or the perception of lack of control, is really, you know, quite amusingly has quite a strong control, I suppose, over you if you are someone going through depression or any other sort of related mental illness, right? It's, I guess, dehumanizing in a way, doesn't it? Not even dehumanize, it's like worse than dehumanizing, because it's like taking away your agency, I suppose, on life. It's getting really deeply philosophical, I suppose. Yeah, social impact, emotionally abusive relationships, or I would assume any sort of abusive relationship can be like a trauma, PTSD. Gosh, it's a bit of a depressing thing to read about. What on earth? Well, anyway, the long and short of it, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, is I'm trying to bring a sense of awareness to it. So now, you know, you can identify your own behaviours, I suppose, which may play into the learned helplessness, and now hopefully you can overcome them, right? Fight for your right for control, to break out of failure, to reject things which have rejected you before, you know? You can do it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, pairs. Like, comments, description, shares greatly appreciated. Twitter, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.